The Brothers Lionheart, Astrid Lindgren. Now I will tell you about my brother Jonathan Lionheart. I want to tell you about him. It's almost like a saga, I think, and also a little bit like a ghost story, and yet it's all true, although it's probably not known by anyone other than Jonathan and me. Jonathan wasn't named Lionheart from the beginning. His last name was Lion, exactly like Mama and me. Jonathan Lion was his name. My name is Carl Lion, and Mama is Sigrid Lion. Papa was named Axel Lion, but he left us when I was only 2 years old. He went to sea, and we haven't heard from him since. But now what I want to tell you is how my brother Jonathan became Jonathan Lionheart, and all the strange things that happened since then. Jonathan knew that I would die soon. I think everyone knew it except me. They knew it at school too, because I stayed at home and coughed and was always sick, and for the last half of a year I haven't been able to go to school at all. All the women Mama sews dresses for knew about it too, and it was one of them who talked with Mama about it, so that I happened to hear, though it wasn't intended. They thought I was asleep, but I was only lying there and had my eyes closed, and I kept on lying there because I didn't want them to know that I had heard that horrible thing, that I would die soon. I was sad, of course, and so terribly scared, and I didn't want Mama to notice, but I talked with Jonathan about it when he came home. "Did you know that I'm dying?" I said as I cried. Jonathan thought for a little while. Maybe he didn't want to answer, but at last he said, "Yes, I know." Then I cried even more. "How can things be so terrible?" I asked. "How can things be so terrible that some must die when they are not even 10 years old?" "You know, Scotty, I don't believe it's that terrible," said Jonathan. "I think it'll be wonderful." "Wonderful," I said. "Is it wonderful to lie under the ground and be dead?" "Oh," said Jonathan, "it's only your shell that lies there. You fly away to an entirely different place." "Where to?" I wondered, because I could hardly believe him. "To Nangiala," he said. Nangiala. He tossed it out as if it were something everyone knew, but I'd never heard talk of it before. "Nangiala," I said. "Where's that?" Then Jonathan said that he didn't know, and it wasn't all that important, but it was somewhere on the other side of the stars, and he began to talk about Nangiala, so that almost immediately you felt like flying there. It's still the time of campfires and sagas there," he said, "and you'll like that." "Nangiala is where all sagas come from," he said, "because things such as that only happen there, and if you went there then you would have adventures from morning to evening, and at night too," Jonathan said. "You know, Scotty," he said, "it won't be like lying here and coughing and being sick and never being able to play." Jonathan calls me Scotty. He's done that ever since I was little, and one time when I asked him why, he said it was because he loved biscotti, especially biscotti like me. Yes, Jonathan liked me, and that was strange, because I've never been anything else but a fairly homely, rather foolish and scared boy, with crooked legs and all. I asked Jonathan how he could like such a homely and foolish boy as me, with crooked legs and all, and then he said, "If you weren't such a nice, homely little boy with crooked legs, then you wouldn't be my Scotty, the one I like." But that evening, when I was so scared of dying, he said that if I went to Nangiala, I would become healthy and strong and more handsome right away. As handsome as you, I asked. More handsome, said Jonathan, but he shouldn't try to fool me, because no one has ever been as handsome as Jonathan, and no one ever will be. Once one of the women Mamma sews for said, "Dear Miss Lyon, you have a son who looks like a prince from a saga." And she didn't mean me, you can be sure of that. Jonathan really did look like a prince from a saga. He did. His hair glistened like gold, and he had beautiful dark blue eyes that really sparkled, and beautiful white teeth, and perfectly straight legs. And not just that, he was also kind and strong, and he knew everything and understood everything, and was at the top of his class, and all the neighborhood kids hung around him wherever he went and wanted to be near him. He made up funny things for them and took them on adventures, and I could never go with them because of course I was lying on my old kitchen sofa day in and day out. But Jonathan told me everything when he came home, everything he had done and everything he had seen and heard and read. He would sit with me as long as I wanted on the edge of my sofa and talk to me. Jonathan also slept in the kitchen, on a bed that he brought out of the closet in the evenings, and when he had gone to bed he continued to tell me sagas and stories until Mamma called out from the other room, "Now you have be quiet. Kelly must sleep, but it's hard to sleep when you don't do anything but cough." Sometimes Jonathan got up in the middle of the night and boiled honey water for me to soften my cough. Yes, he was kind, Jonathan. That evening, when I was so scared of dying, he sat by me for several hours, and we talked about Nangiala, but very quietly so that Mamma wouldn't hear. She was sewing as usual. She has her sewing machine in a room, the room where she sleeps. We only have one room, and the kitchen, you know. The door there was open, and we could hear her singing the same old song about a seaman far away at sea. Maybe it was Papa she was thinking about. I don't remember exactly how it goes. I only recall a few lines which go like this. "If I die at sea, my love, perhaps one evening a snow-white dove flies home to you, then to your window hurry, my soul is near, wanting to rest a while in arms so dear." I think it's a beautiful and sad song, but Jonathan laughed when he heard it and said, "You know, Scotty, maybe you'll fly to me one evening from Nangiala, and you'll sit there as a snow-white dove on the windowsill, if you're so kind." I began to cough just then, and he lifted me up and held me as he always did when it was bad, and he sang, "My little Scotty, I know your soul is here, wanting to rest a while in arms so dear." Not until then did I think about what it would be like going to Nangiala without Jonathan, how lonely I would become without him. What good would it be to have lots of sagas and adventures if Jonathan weren't with me? I'd just be scared and wouldn't know what to do. "I don't want to go there," I said, and I cried. "I want to be where you are, Jonathan." "Well, of course I'm coming to Nangiala too. Surely you understand," said Jonathan. "In time." "In time, yes," I said, "but maybe you'll live until you're 90 years old, and during that time I'll be there alone." Then Jonathan said that in Nangiala time is not the same as it is here on earth. Even if he did live to be 90, I wouldn't think that it took more than 2 days before he came, because that's the way it is when a real time doesn't exist. "You can stay alone for 2 days," he said. "You can climb trees and make a campfire in the forest and sit by a little stream and fish, all those things you've longed to do so much, and while you're sitting there and bringing up a perch, I'll come flying in, and then you'll say, 'What in the world, Jonathan, are you doing Are you here already?" I tried to stop crying because I thought I could stand 2 days. "Just imagine how good it would be if you'd gone first," I said, "so that it was you sitting there and fishing." Jonathan agreed with me about that. He looked at me for a while kindly, as he always does, and I noticed he was sad, because he said very quietly and rather sorrowfully, "But instead I must live on earth without my Scotty, maybe for 90 years. Yes, that's what we believed. Now I'm coming to the hard part, the part I can't think about, the part I can't stop thinking about. My brother Jonathan, it could be that he was still with me, sitting and talking with me in the evenings, going to school and playing with the neighborhood kids, and boiling honey water for me and all that. But it is not like that. It is not. Jonathan is in Nangiala now. It's hard, I can't tell you, but this is what it said in the paper afterward. A horrible extensive fire ravaged Falkerrosen block here in town last night, in which one of the old wooden houses was left in ashes, and a life was lost. A 10-year-old boy, Carl Lyon, was present when the fire broke out, alone and sick in bed in an apartment 2 stories up. Immediately after coming home, his brother, 13-year-old Jonathan Lyon, bravely rushed into the burning building to rescue his brother before anyone could stop them. Within seconds, however, the entire staircase was a sea of fire, and because the 2 boys were shut inside with the flames, the only thing that remained for them to try was leaping out of the window to save themselves. The horrified crowd that had gathered outside the building was forced to witness as the 13-year-old took his brother on his back with the fire blazing behind him and unhesitatingly threw himself out of the window. In his fall to the ground, the boy was so seriously injured that he died almost immediately. The younger brother, however, protected by his brother's body in the fall, escaped uninjured. The mother of the 2 brothers was visiting with a customer at the time. She is a dressmaker, and she received a severe shock when returning home. It is unknown how the fire started. On the other side of the paper there was more about Jonathan. It was written by the schoolteacher. This is what it said. "Dear Jonathan Lyon, shouldn't you have really been called Jonathan Lionheart? Do you remember when we read in the history book about a brave English king by the name of Richard the Lionheart? Do you remember what you said then? Imagine being so brave that afterward it's in the history books. I could never be like that. Dear Jonathan, even if you are not in the history books, you were just as brave at the decisive moment. Of course you were a hero as great as any other. Your old schoolteacher will never forget you. Your school friends will remember you for a long time, too. It will be empty in class without our happy, handsome Jonathan, but the gods love those who die young. Jonathan Lionheart, rest in peace." Greta Henderson. She's rather silly, Jonathan's schoolteacher, but she thought highly of Jonathan, just like everyone did, and it was good that she came up with Lionheart. That was really good. There probably isn't anyone in town who doesn't mourn for Jonathan, and who hadn't thought that it would have been better if I had died instead. At least that's what I hear from all the women who come here with their fabric and muslin and things. They sigh and talk about me when they go through the kitchen, and they say to Mama, "Poor Miss Lyon, and Jonathan, who was just so extraordinary." Now we live in the house next to our old house, in an apartment exactly like the old one, but it's on the 1st floor. We got some used furniture from social services, and the women have also given us some things. I lie on practically the same kitchen sofa as before. Everything is practically the same as before, and everything, absolutely everything, is different than before, because Jonathan is not here any more. No one sits with me and talks with me in the evenings. I'm so lonely that my heart aches, and I can only lie here and whisper to myself the words that Jonathan said right before he died. When we were lying on the ground after we had jumped, at first he was lying face down, but someone turned him over and I saw his face. A little blood was running out of the corner of his mouth, and he almost couldn't talk, but it was as if he were trying to smile, and he said a few words. "Don't cry, Scotty, we'll meet in Nangiala." He only said that and nothing more. Then he closed his eyes, and the folks came and carried him away, and I never saw him again. The time right after that I don't want to remember, but it's hard to forget something so horrible and painful. I laid there on my sofa and thought about Jonathan until I felt my head would split. No one could miss him as much as I did. I was scared too, because I kept thinking that everything about Nangiala might not be true. Maybe it was just one of those funny things that Jonathan used to make up so often. I cried a lot, I did. But then Jonathan came and consoled me. Yes, he came. Oh, it was nice. Everything was fine again, almost. He probably realized there in Nangiala how I felt without him, and he thought that he should console me. That's why he came to me, and now I'm not sad any more. Now I'm just waiting. It was one evening a little while ago that he came. I was alone at home, and I was lying down and crying for him, and I was scared and unhappy and sick and miserable, more than I can say. The kitchen window stood open because it was such a fine, warm spring evening. I heard the doves cooing outside. There are many of them in the backyard, and they coo all the time now in the spring. Then it happened. Well, I was lying there and crying with my face in the pillow. I heard cooing quite close, and when I glanced up, there was a dove sitting on the windowsill, watching me with its kind eyes. A snow-white dove, please notice, not a gray one like those in the yard. A snow-white dove. You can't imagine how I felt at first when I saw it, because it was exactly like in the song. Maybe one evening a snow-white dove flies home to you, and it was as if I heard Jonathan singing it again. My little Scotty, I know your soul is here, but now it was he who had come to me instead. I wanted to say something, but I couldn't. I just lay there and heard the dove cooing. And behind its cooing, or in the middle of its cooing, or how should I say it, I heard Jonathan's voice, though it didn't sound as it usually did. It was just a sort of whispering all over the kitchen. This sounds almost like a ghost story, and you might have been scared, but I wasn't. I was so happy. I could have jumped to the roof, because everything that I heard was so wonderful. Well then, it certainly was true about Nangiala. Jonathan wanted me to hurry and get there, because everything there was good in every way, he said. Just imagine a house stood waiting for him. When he arrived, he had been given a house completely his own in Nangiala. It's an old farm, he cried, called Knight's Farm, and it lies in Cherry Valley. Doesn't that sound wonderful? And just think, the first thing he saw when he got to Knight's Farm was a little green sign on the gate, and on the sign was clearly written Brothers Lionheart, which means that we'll live there, both of us, said Jonathan. Anyway, I'll be named Lionheart too when I go to Nangiala. I'm glad about that, because I want to have the same name as Jonathan, even if I'm not as brave as him. "Just come as fast as you can," he said. "If you don't find me home at Knight's farm, I'll be sitting down by the stream fishing." Then it became quiet, and the dove flew away, right over the roofs of the houses, back to Nangiala, and I'm lying here on my sofa just waiting to fly after him. I hope it's not too hard to find my way there. But Jonathan said it wasn't hard at all. I've written down the address for safety's sake. Brothers Lionheart, Knight's Farm, Cherry Valley, Nangiala. Jonathan has lived alone there for 2 months now. For 2 long, terrible months I've been without him. But I'm going to Nangiala soon now too. Soon I will fly there, maybe tonight. It feels as if it should be tonight. I'll write a note and set it on the kitchen table so that Mama finds it when she wakes up early in the morning. On the note it will say, "Don't cry, Mama, we'll meet in Nangiala." Then it happened, and I've never been part of anything stranger. Suddenly I was standing in front of the gate, reading the green sign, Brothers Lionheart. How did I get here? When did I fly? How could I find my way without asking anyone at all? I don't know. I only know that suddenly I was standing there, looking at the name on the sign. I called to Jonathan. I shouted several times, but he didn't answer. And then I remembered, of course, he was sitting down by the stream fishing. I began to run down the narrow path to the stream. I ran, and there, down by the bridge, sat Jonathan. My brother, he sat there, his hair glistening in the sunshine, and if I tried to tell you, I still couldn't say what it felt like to see him again. He didn't notice that I'd come. I tried to shout Jonathan, but I think I was crying, because it became just a funny little sound. Jonathan heard it anyway. He looked up and saw me. At first it was as if he didn't know me, but then he shouted out and threw down his fishing pole and came rushing up and hugged me. Exactly as if he wanted to make sure that I had really come, and then I cried only a little. Why should I be crying, for that matter? But I had missed him so much. Jonathan, he laughed instead, and we stood there on the hillside, down by the stream, and held each other, and were happier than I can begin to say, because we were together again. And then Jonathan said, "Oh, Scotty Lionheart, now you're here at last." Scotty Lionheart, it sounded crazy, so we laughed about it, and we laughed about it more and more, just as if it were the funniest thing we'd heard in a long time, though it was probably because we just wanted something to laugh at, because we were so happy and we were tingling inside. And as we laughed, we began wrestling, but that didn't stop us from laughing. Oh no, we fell down in the grass, and we lay there and rolled around and laughed harder and harder, until at last we laughed so hard that we fell down into the stream. Then we laughed so much that I thought we'd drown, but instead we began to swim. I never could swim, though I've wished so badly to learn how. Now I could, just like that. I could swim easily. "Jonathan, I can swim," I shouted. "Yes, you can truly swim," said Jonathan. And then suddenly I thought of something. "Jonathan, have you noticed something?" I said. "I'm not coughing any more." "No, you're truly not coughing," said Jonathan. "You're in Nangiala now." I swam around for quite a while, and then I scrambled up onto the bridge and stood there, wet with the water running out of my clothes. My pants stuck tightly to my legs, which was why I could see clearly what had happened. Believe it or not, my legs were perfectly straight, exactly like Jonathan's. Then I thought and wondered if I'd also become handsome too. I asked Jonathan if he thought so, in case he could see if I'd become handsome. "Look in the mirror," he said, and he meant the stream, because the water was smooth and still, so that you could see yourself in it. I lay down on my stomach on the bridge and peered down over the edge, and I saw myself in the water, but I didn't notice anything particularly handsome about myself. Jonathan came and lay beside me, and we laid there for a long time peering at the brothers Lionheart down there in the water. Jonathan so handsome, with his golden hair and his eyes, and that fine face he has, and I saw too my bony nose and my scraggly hair and all. "No, I can't say that I've become handsome," I said, but Jonathan thought there was a great difference from before. "And you look so healthy too," he said. Then I examined myself properly. I felt as I lay there on the bridge that I was healthy and well, every part of me, so why did I need to be handsome? My whole body was so happy that it seemed to be laughing. We lay there for a while and let the sunshine warm us, and we watched the fish swimming in and out under the bridge. But then Jonathan wanted us to go home, and I also wanted to, because I was curious about Knight's farm, where I would live. Jonathan walked in front of me on the path up to the farm, and with my fine straight legs I jogged behind him. I went along just staring at my legs and feeling how good it was to use them, but when we'd gone a little bit up the hillside, I suddenly turned my head, and then I saw Cherry Valley at last. Oh, the valley! It was white with cherry blossoms everywhere. White and green it was, with cherry blossoms and green grass, and through all the green and white a river floated floated like a silver ribbon. Why hadn't I noticed it all before, had I only seen Jonathan? But now I stood still on the path and saw how beautiful it was, and I said to Jonathan, "This must be the most beautiful valley on earth." "Yes, but not on earth," said Jonathan, and then I remembered that I was in Nangiala, and all around Cherry Valley were tall mountains, which were beautiful too, and down the mountain slopes streams and waterfalls flowed into the valley, singing because it was spring. There was something special in the air too. It felt as if you could drink it, it was so pure and good. "They could do with a few pounds of this air back at home in town," I said, because I remembered how I used to long for air when I laid on my kitchen sofa, and it felt as if there were no air at all. But here it was, and I breathed in as much as I could. It was as if I couldn't get enough. Jonathan laughed at me and said, "You can leave a little for me anyhow." The path we walked on was white with fallen cherry blossoms, and fine white petals floated down over us, so that we got them in our hair and everywhere. But I like little green paths with cherry blossom petals on them. I really do. And at the end of the path lay Knight's farm, with the green sign on the gate, "Brothers Lionheart." I read it aloud to Jonathan. "Just think that we'll live here." "Yes, think of that, Scotty," said Jonathan. "Isn't it fine?" And it certainly was fine. I understood how Jonathan felt. I personally couldn't imagine any other place where I'd rather live. It was an old white house, not big at all, with green timbers and a green door and a little green lawn all around, where cowslips and daisies grew in the grass. Lilacs and cherry trees were there too, blooming wildly, and surrounding it was a stone wall, a short little gray wall with pink flowers in it. You could have jumped over it as easily as anything, but once inside the gate, you felt that the wall protected you from everything outside it, as if you were now home and on your own. By the way, there were two houses, not just one, though the other was more like barn or something like that. There lay at an angle to each other the houses, and just where they met an old bench stood that almost looked like it was from the Stone Age. A nice bench and a pleasant corner it was, in any case. You almost felt like sitting there, thinking for a while, or talking and watching the little birds, maybe drinking juice or something. "I'll enjoy it here," I said to Jonathan. "Is it just as nice inside the house?" "Come and see," he said. He already stood by the door, and was ready to go in, but just then I heard neighing. Yes, it really was a horse neighing, and Jonathan said, "I think we'll go to the barn first." He went in the other house, and I ran after him. Just guess if I ran after him. It definitely was a barn, just like I'd thought, and two horses stood there, two beautiful brown horses, which turned their heads and neighed at us. When we came in through the door, "Here are Grim and Fowler," said Jonathan. "Guess which of them is yours." "No, don't try," I said. "Don't try telling me that one of these horses is mine, because I won't believe it anyway." But Jonathan said that in Nangiala no one could manage without a horse. "You can't go anywhere without a horse," he said. "And you see, Scotty, you have to travel a long way sometimes." That was the best thing I'd heard in a long time, that you had to have a horse in Nangiala. Yes, because I love horses, and think how soft their noses are. I can't imagine anything else that's so soft. There were a pair of unusually beautiful horses, the two there in the barn. Fayyalar had a white blaze on his forehead, but otherwise they were exactly the same. "Then maybe Grim is mine," I said, because Jonathan wanted me to guess. "Well, you're off the mark," said Jonathan. "Fayyalar is yours." I let Fayyalar nuzzle me, and I rubbed him without being a bit scared, although I'd never touched a horse before. I liked him from the start, and he certainly liked me, at least I thought so. "We've also got rabbits," said Jonathan, "in a cage behind the barn. You can look at them later." Well, that's what he thought. "I must see them now, right away," I said, "because I've always wanted rabbits, and at home in town you just couldn't have them." I made a quick little turn behind the barn, and 3 small, sweet rabbits really sat there in a cage, nibbling on some dandelion leaves. "It's strange," I said to Jonathan after that. "Everything I've wished for is here in Nangiala." "Yes, that's what I told you," said Jonathan, and it was definitely as he'd said, when he sat there with me in the kitchen at home, although now I was able to see that it was true, too, and I was happy. There are some things you never forget. Never ever ever will I forget that first evening in the kitchen at Knight's farm. How glorious it was, and how it felt to lie there and talk to Jonathan exactly like before. Now we were living in a kitchen again, like we had always done, though it didn't look like our kitchen at home in town. That much was certain. I think it's probably very old, the kitchen at Knight's farm, with rough beams in the ceiling, and its large open fireplace. What a fireplace it took up, almost a whole wall, and if you wanted to cook, you needed to do it directly over the fire, just like they did in the old days. In the middle of the floor stood the sturdiest table I've seen in my life, with long wooden benches along the sides, and I think at least a score of people could sit there and eat at the same time without becoming crowded. "It would probably be good if we live in the kitchen like we used to," said Jonathan, "so Mama can have the other room when she comes." 1 room and a kitchen, that was the entire Knight's farm, but we weren't used to more, and we didn't need more. It was still at least twice as big as at home. Yes, at home I told Jonathan about the note I'd laid on the kitchen table for Mama. I wrote to her that we'd meet in Nangiala, though who knows when she'll come. It may take a long time, said Jonathan, but she'll have a fine room with space for 10 sewing machines if she wants them. Guess what I like? I like lying on an old-fashioned bench in an old-fashioned kitchen, talking with Jonathan while the light from the fire flickers around the walls, and when I look out through the window I see a cherry tree branch swaying in the evening breeze, and then the fire dies smaller and smaller until only the embers are left, and the shadows darken in the corners, and I become sleepier and sleepier, and I lie there, not coughing, and Jonathan talks to me. He talks and talks until at last I hear his voice just as a whisper again, and then I sleep. That's exactly what I like, and that's how it was the first evening at Knight's Farm, and that's why I'll never forget.